The realization hit me in the produce section of a grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. I was 62 years old, standing there with a cantaloupe in my hand, trying to remember if my wife liked cantaloupe or if that was just something I bought because it seemed like the kind of fruit a responsible husband should buy. And suddenly, with the fluorescent lights humming above me and some generic pop song playing through the store speakers, I understood with perfect, devastating clarity that I was more than halfway through my life, and I had no idea who I actually was. I'm Walter. I'm 65 now, 3 years past that moment in the grocery store, and I'm finally beginning to understand the difference between sacrifice and self-erasure, between being a good man and being no man at all, between living for others and forgetting to live at all. This is the story of how I disappeared. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, choice by choice, year by year, until I woke up one day and realized the person everyone depended on had never actually existed. He was just a collection of roles I played, obligations I fulfilled, expectations I met. Underneath all of that, there was nothing. No wants, no desires, no dreams, no self. Just a 62-year-old man standing in a grocery store, holding a cantaloupe, wondering if he'd ever made a single decision based on what he actually wanted. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the choices that seemed right at the time, the sacrifices that felt noble, the slow fade into invisibility that I mistook for maturity. I was 23 when I married Linda, young in retrospect, though it didn't feel young then. She was pregnant, unplanned, unintended, but not unwanted. At least I told myself it wasn't unwanted. The truth is, I didn't have time to figure out what I wanted. There was a baby coming, and there were things you did when a baby was coming. You got married. You got a job with benefits. You became responsible. I've been working construction, living with 2 roommates, playing in a band on weekends. Nothing serious, just cover songs at local bars, but I loved it. The music, the performance, the feeling of being on stage with my guitar and actually mattering to someone, even if it was just drunk college kids who wanted to hear Springsteen. The weekend after Linda told me she was pregnant, I sold my guitar, got $800 for it, a beautiful Gibson that had taken me 2 years to save for. I used the money for the security deposit on our first apartment. Linda cried when I told her, said I didn't have to do that, but we both knew I did. Babies need space. Adults have responsibilities. Music was a hobby, and hobbies were luxuries we couldn't afford. I didn't play guitar again for 40 years. My son Daniel was born 3 months after the wedding. Small, red-faced, screaming his lungs out in the delivery room. They handed him to me, and I felt this overwhelming surge of something. Not quite love. I didn't know him yet. More like duty. Like my entire life had just been redefined by this 7-pound person who couldn't even hold his own head up. From that moment on, every decision was about him, about them, about everyone except me. I took a job at an accounting firm. I'd always been good with numbers, and it paid better than construction, with actual benefits and a path forward. I hated it from day one. The fluorescent lights, the cubicle walls, the endless spreadsheets and client meetings and performance reviews. But it paid the bills. It provided. That's what mattered. Linda stayed home with Daniel. It made sense financially. Daycare cost almost as much as she'd make working. She'd wanted to be a teacher, had been 2 years into her degree when she got pregnant. She planned to finish eventually, she said, once Daniel was in school. Once things settled down, she never went back. By the time Daniel started kindergarten, we had 2 more kids, Sarah and Michael, and the idea of Linda going back to school seemed impossible, impractical, selfish even. To spend money on her education when we had 3 kids to raise. I wonder now if she resented that, if she lay awake at night like I did, wondering who she might have been if she'd finished her degree, taught her own classroom, built her own career. But we never talked about it, never talked about any of it. The kids became my entire world. Not in that beautiful, fulfilling way people talk about when they describe parenthood, in a consuming, obliterating way. Every decision was filtered through their needs. Every dollar was allocated to their activities. Every weekend was spent at soccer games and dance recitals and birthday parties. I coached Daniel's Little League team for 6 years. I loved baseball as a kid, but coaching wasn't about me loving baseball. It was about being present, being involved, being the kind of father who showed up, even when I was exhausted from work, even when I'd rather be doing literally anything else. I can't tell you how many of those games I actually enjoyed. Can't tell you if I even liked coaching. It was just something I did, something I was supposed to do. Another role to play, another expectation to meet. Sarah took dance lessons every Tuesday and Thursday evening, plus Saturdays when she had rehearsals. Linda would take her while I stayed home with the boys. Then Linda would come back and I'd take Daniel to baseball practice while she made dinner. Then we'd all eat together, do homework, baths, bedtime. Then we'd collapse into bed, too tired to talk, too tired to connect, just marking time until we had to do it all again the next day. I don't remember the last time Linda and I had a conversation that wasn't about the kids or bills, or who was taking which child to which activity. Sometime in our late 30s, we stopped being partners and became co-managers of a small, chaotic organization. We were efficient, organized, effective. We just weren't intimate, weren't connected, weren't really anything beyond 2 people who shared a mortgage and a last name. Michael was different from the other 2. Sensitive, artistic, always drawing elaborate fantasy worlds and writing stories about dragons and knights. The other kids at school bullied him for it, called him weird, made fun of his interests. It broke my heart. I wanted to encourage him, to tell him his creativity was beautiful, that being different was good. But I also remembered being different as a kid, remembered how hard it was. So instead, I tried to toughen him up, signed him up for sports he didn't want to play, discouraged the drawing and writing, told him to focus on real skills that would help him get ahead in life. I can see him now, at 11 years old, showing me a story he'd written. Must have been 30 pages typed up on the computer, printed out and stapled together like a real book. He was so proud of it. His eyes were shining when he handed it to me. And I said, "That's nice, Mike, but don't you think you should be spending more time on your math homework? You're falling behind." I watched the light go out of his eyes, watched him take the story back, mumble something about, "Yeah, probably," and walk away. He never showed me his writing again. That moment haunts me. That casual dismissal of his passion, his identity, who he actually was. I thought I was protecting him, teaching him to be practical, to focus on what mattered. But what I was really teaching him was that who he was didn't matter, that his dreams were distractions, that he should learn to disappear, just like I had. The years blurred together. Elementary school became middle school, became high school. 3 kids with different schedules, different needs, different problems. Linda and I became logistics coordinators, managing pickup times and permission slips and college application essays. We barely spoke, except to update each other on who needed to be where when. My job became more demanding as I climbed the ladder. More responsibility, more hours, more stress, but also more money, which we needed for 3 kids who all wanted to go to college. So I worked late, came home after dinner, after baths, sometimes after bedtime, missed recitals and games and school events. I told myself I was providing, sacrificing, being responsible. My father had worked himself to death, literally a heart attack at 57, to give his family a better life. That's what men did. They worked. They provided. They sacrificed their own comfort, their own desires, their own selves for the people who depended on them. Noble, right? Self-sacrificing, strong. Except somewhere along the way, sacrifice became erasure. I stopped having preferences, stopped having hobbies, stopped having anything that was mine alone. If someone asked me what I liked to do for fun, I couldn't answer. Fun was something other people had. I had responsibilities. On my 40th birthday, Linda asked me what I wanted to do. Dinner out? A party? A weekend trip? I had no idea. Couldn't think of a single thing I wanted. Not because I was being modest or self-deprecating, but because I genuinely had no desires left. I'd spent 20 years suppressing every want, every impulse, every personal preference, until there was nothing left to suppress. We went to dinner at a steakhouse. It was fine. The kids complained about being bored. Linda was tired from work. She'd gone back when Michael started middle school, taking a job as a teacher's aide since she'd never finished her degree. I was tired from work. We all went through the motions of celebrating while feeling absolutely nothing. That should have been a wake-up call, but it wasn't, because I didn't even recognize that numbness as a problem. I thought that was just what life was. You got older, you got tired, you stopped wanting things. You just survived until you didn't. The kids started leaving for college. Daniel first, then Sarah 2 years later. The house got quieter. Linda and I had more time together, more space, more opportunity to reconnect. Except we had nothing to connect over. We'd spent 25 years talking about the kids. With them gone, we had nothing to say to each other. We'd sit at dinner in silence, chewing our food, both of us scrolling through our phones because it was less awkward than admitting we were strangers. When Michael left for college, art school, because he'd never stopped drawing despite my discouragement, the house felt massive, empty. Linda and I rattled around in it like two ghosts haunting the same space. I thought about suggesting we do something together, take a class, join a gym, travel. But every time I tried to think of what to suggest, I came up blank. What did we even like? What had we liked before the kids, before the responsibilities, before we disappeared into our roles? I couldn't remember. Couldn't remember what Linda enjoyed beyond what she did for others. Couldn't remember what I enjoyed at all. We were two hollow people living in a house full of memories of the people we used to be. Work became my escape. At least there, I had clear objectives, things to accomplish, metrics to meet, a sense of purpose, even if that purpose was just increasing quarterly revenue by 3%. It was something, more than I had at home. I started staying late even when I didn't need to, taking on extra projects, volunteering for committees, anything to avoid going home to that silent house and that stranger I'd married, and the crushing realization that I'd built a life I didn't recognize and couldn't escape. Linda noticed, of course, started making comments about how I was never home, about how, now that the kids were gone, we should be spending more time together. But she said it without conviction, like she was reciting lines she thought she should say. The truth was, I think she was as relieved by my absence as I was. We'd been performing marriage for so long that neither of us knew how to actually be married anymore. On my 60th birthday, the kids came home for a surprise party. It was nice. They'd put thought into it, got a cake from the bakery I liked, invited my brother and his family, decorated the house. Sarah made a slideshow of photos from my life, baby pictures, wedding photos, pictures of me with the kids at various ages. I watched that slideshow with a growing sense of disconnection. The young man in those early photos, cocky, smiling, holding a guitar, looked like a stranger. When did he disappear? When did I become this tired, gray man who looked at the camera with vacant eyes? The photos from the kids' childhoods showed me present but absent, there in body but not in spirit, going through the motions of fatherhood while thinking about work deadlines or bills or anything except the moment I was actually in. And the recent photos, the ones from the last few years, I looked like a ghost, like someone had taken my features and drained all the life out of them, leaving just a shell that walked and talked and smiled on cue, but didn't actually exist. After everyone left, I sat in my study looking at those photos on my phone, scrolling through 60 years of life, trying to find one picture, just one, where I looked happy. Not performing happiness for the camera, actually happy. I couldn't find any. That was 1.5 years before the grocery store moment. But it planted a seed. This vague awareness that something was deeply wrong. Not with my circumstances, exactly. The kids were healthy, successful, independent. Linda and I had savings, a nice house, our health. By any objective measure, I'd done everything right. So why did I feel like I'd done everything wrong? I started going to therapy, 61 years old, first time in my life. Dr. Marcus Redding, a man in his 50s who specialized in what he called masculine identity crises. I told him I felt empty, lost, like I didn't know who I was. "Tell me about your hobbies," he said in our first session. "I don't really have any." "Okay, what do you do for fun?" "I work, spend time with Linda, see the kids when they visit." "What do you do that's just for you, that has no purpose beyond your own enjoyment?" I sat there for a long time, trying to think of something. Finally, I can't think of anything. "When was the last time you did something purely because you wanted to?" I couldn't answer that either. Every activity, every decision, every moment of my life for the last 40 years had been about someone else. About what needed to be done, what was responsible, what was expected. "Walter," Dr. Redding said gently, "when did you stop existing?" That question broke something open in me. When did I stop existing? I didn't know. It hadn't been a moment, a decision. It had been a slow fade, a gradual disappearance, a death by 1,000 small sacrifices that I'd told myself were noble. Over the following months, Dr. Redding helped me see the pattern. How I'd conflated being selfless with having no self. How I'd mistaken self-neglect for sacrifice. How I'd taught myself that wanting anything for myself was selfish, indulgent, wrong. "There's a difference," he explained, "between healthy sacrifice and self-erasure. Healthy sacrifice means sometimes putting others' needs before your own while maintaining a core sense of self. Self-erasure means obliterating your own needs, wants, and identity entirely. You didn't sacrifice for your family, Walter. You disappeared for them. Isn't that what I was supposed to do? As a father, as a husband, put my family first? First, yes, only, no. You can't pour from an empty cup. And you've been running on empty for decades." The grocery store moment happened about 6 months into therapy. I'd been thinking about Dr. Redding's questions, about who I was, what I wanted, what brought me joy. And I still didn't have answers. I'd been so thoroughly erased that I didn't know where to start looking for myself. Standing there in the produce section, cantaloupe in hand, I had this sudden vision of my entire life as a series of produce selections, buying what seemed responsible, what seemed healthy, what seemed like the kind of thing a good husband and father should buy. Never once asking myself what I actually wanted. Did I like cantaloupe? I had no idea. I'd been buying it for 30 years and couldn't tell you if I'd ever actually tasted it. It was just part of the rotation, something to put in the fruit bowl, something to check off the list. And if I couldn't answer that simple question, do I like cantaloupe? What chance did I have of answering bigger ones? Who was I? What did I want from the rest of my life? What did happiness even feel like? I stood there, this 62-year-old man in the grocery store, and I started crying. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears running down my face while I held a cantaloupe and realized I was more than halfway through my life and I'd spent all of it being nobody. An elderly woman asked if I was okay. I said yes, just having a moment. She patted my arm and moved on. I put the cantaloupe back and walked out of the store without buying anything. I drove to a park and sat in my car for 2 hours just thinking about the boy I'd been at 23, full of music and dreams and potential, about the man I'd become, efficient, responsible, empty, about the years I'd spent sleepwalking through my own life while thinking I was being noble. And I thought about the future. If I was lucky, I had maybe 20 years left. 20 years that I could spend the way I'd spent the last 40, meeting expectations, fulfilling obligations, being who everyone needed me to be, while being nothing to myself. Or I could do something different, something terrifying, something necessary. I could try to find out who Walter actually was. When I got home, Linda was in the kitchen making dinner. I walked in and asked her, "Do we like cantaloupe?" She looked at me confused. "What? Cantaloupe. Do we like it? Do you like it? Do I like it?" "I don't know. We buy it sometimes. But do we actually like it? Or do we just buy it because it seems like the kind of thing we should buy?" Linda set down the knife she was holding. "Walter, what's going on? I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know anything about myself except that I've spent 40 years being a father and a husband and an employee. And somewhere underneath all those roles, there might be an actual person. But I can't find him." She stared at me. "Are you having a breakdown?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally waking up." We talked for hours that night, really talked, for the first time in years. I told her about the therapy, about the questions I couldn't answer, about the growing realization that I'd disappeared. And she admitted she felt the same way, that she didn't know who she was either, outside of being a mother and a wife, and now a teacher's aide. "When did we stop being people?" she asked. "I think it was gradual. We became parents, and that just took over everything. And we let it because it felt noble. Like we were supposed to, completely sacrifice ourselves. But we sacrificed too much. We sacrificed each other, and ourselves." That conversation was the beginning of something. Not a fixing of our marriage. It was too late for that. We'd both changed too much and drifted too far. But a kind of honest reckoning with what we'd lost and what we might still salvage. We separated 6 months later. Not with anger or drama, just with a mutual acknowledgement that we'd spent 35 years being parents together, but had never really been partners. With the kids grown, there was no reason to keep pretending. The kids were surprisingly understanding. They'd seen us. They'd watched us drift apart, watched us become hollow. They wanted us to be happy, even if that meant being happy separately. I moved into a small apartment downtown. 1 bedroom, balcony overlooking the street. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. For the first time since I was 23, I had space that was completely my own. And I had no idea what to do with it. The first few weeks were disorienting. I'd wake up and have nowhere I needed to be, nothing I needed to do, no one depending on me. No obligations, no expectations. Just open space where my life used to be. Dr. Redding encouraged me to explore, to try things, to see what resonated. So I started saying yes to random things. Took a pottery class. Hated it. My hands aren't steady enough. Joined a hiking group. Enjoyed that more than expected. Went to a blues concert and felt something wake up inside me that I'd forgotten existed. Music. God, I'd missed music. I bought a guitar. Nothing fancy, just something to start with. My fingers didn't remember the chords at first. Had to relearn everything. But slowly, painfully, the muscle memory returned. And with it, something else. Some part of myself I'd buried 40 years ago when I sold that Gibson for a security deposit. I started playing for an hour every morning, then 2 hours, then finding open mic nights at local bars. Standing on stage again at 63, older than everyone else by decades, playing songs I loved just because I loved them. It felt like waking up, like discovering I'd been asleep for 40 years and was only now opening my eyes. I reconnected with Michael. Really connected. Not just the performative father-son interactions we've been having. He was living in Seattle, working as an illustrator, doing exactly what I'd discouraged him from doing. And he was happy, genuinely happy in a way I'd never been. I was wrong, I told him during one of our video calls. When you were a kid, and I discouraged your art, I was so wrong. I know you thought you were protecting me. I wasn't protecting you. I was projecting my own fears onto you. I'd given up everything I loved to be responsible, and I couldn't stand watching you hold on to what you loved. It reminded me of what I'd lost. You could still have it, Dad. You're only 63. I'm trying, finally. We started having real conversations after that. About art, about music, about regret and choice and the courage it takes to actually live your life instead of just surviving it. Michael told me he'd been angry at me for years, but was starting to understand, starting to forgive. You did your best with what you knew, he said. You just didn't know very much about how to be a person instead of just a provider. He was right. I didn't know. My father didn't know. His father probably didn't know. We just passed down this template of masculine responsibility. Work hard, provide, sacrifice, never complain, never want anything for yourself. And we called it strength, when it was really just slow-motion suicide. I'm 65 now. 3 years past that moment in the grocery store. 3 years into this journey of trying to figure out who Walter is when he's not performing roles for other people. I can't say I found all the answers, but I'm starting to ask better questions. Not what should I want, but what do I actually want? Not what would a responsible person do, but what would bring me joy. I play music 3 times a week now. Sometimes alone in my apartment, sometimes at open mics, sometimes with a group of guys I met who jam on weekends. We're not good, but we're having fun, and that's the point. I go hiking every Saturday morning. I read books just because they interest me, not because they're improving or educational. I eat food I actually like instead of food that seems healthy or responsible. Small things. But for someone who spent 40 years not doing anything for himself, small things feel revolutionary. Linda and I are friendly. We talk every few weeks, usually about the kids or logistics of holidays. She's dating someone, which made me feel weird at first, but now I'm happy for her. The kids are good, better than good. Daniel is a lawyer, married with 2 kids. Sarah is a physician's assistant, recently engaged. Michael is thriving in Seattle, his illustrations in magazines and children's books. They're all becoming themselves in ways I never let myself become. They visit sometimes. We have different relationships now, more honest. They ask me about my music, my hiking, what I'm reading, not just to be polite, but because they're genuinely curious about who I'm becoming. You seem lighter, Dad, Sarah said during her last visit, like something heavy lifted off you. She was right. The weight of constantly performing, constantly meeting expectations, constantly being who everyone needed me to be, that weight is gone, and without it, I can finally breathe. I think about that young man sometimes, the 23-year-old with the guitar and the dreams, who thought he was being responsible by selling it all and buckling down. I understand why he made those choices. He was scared. He was becoming a father, and he didn't want to fail. But I wish I could tell him that there was another way, that he could be a good father and still be himself, that sacrifice doesn't have to mean self-erasure, that his children would be better served by a father who modeled how to have a self than by a father who modeled how to disappear. I wish I could tell him that the music matters, that his wants matter, that he matters, not just as a provider or a parent, but as a person with his own inner life, his own needs, his own right to exist. But I can't go back. None of us can. All I can do is live differently going forward. All I can do is spend whatever time I have left actually living it for myself, not for some idea of who I should be or what I should want. All I can do is refuse to disappear any further. I'm 65 years old. My life is more than half over. But the second half, however long it lasts, is going to be different. It's going to be mine, not selfish, not irresponsible, not negligent, just mine, with space for other people, yes, but also space for me, for the music I love and the books I enjoy and the mountains I want to climb and the life I want to live. I spent 40 years believing that being a good man meant having no self, that sacrifice meant obliteration, that responsibility meant disappearing. I was wrong. Being a good man means knowing yourself well enough to give from a full cup. Sacrifice means sometimes putting others first while maintaining your core identity. Responsibility means taking care of others without abandoning yourself in the process. These are hard lessons to learn at 65. I wish I'd learned them at 25, at 35, at any age before more than half my life was gone. But maybe it's not too late. Maybe there's still time to show my kids a different way, to model for my grandchildren what it looks like to be whole instead of hollow, to demonstrate that you can be dependable and responsible and present for the people you love while still being present for yourself. Maybe there's still time to actually live some of this life I've been given. That's my hope anyway, my goal, to spend whatever time I have left remembering that I'm not just a collection of roles and obligations. I'm a person, a specific, particular person with preferences and desires and dreams. I like blues music and hiking and books about history. I don't like cantaloupe. I finally tried it, really tried it, and I hate it. Always have, probably. I just never paid attention. These are small discoveries, but for someone who spent decades not knowing anything about himself, they feel monumental. I'm 65 years old now, and I'm finally, slowly, painstakingly learning how to be myself. It's terrifying. It's exhilarating. It's long overdue, and it's mine. I went to Daniel's house last weekend. His kids, Emma and Jack, are 7 and 5 now, old enough to ask questions, young enough to still think their grandfather is interesting. Jack found my guitar case in the hallway. "What's that, Grandpa?" "My guitar. Want to see it?" I opened the case and his eyes went wide. Emma came running over. "Can you play something?" I looked at Daniel. He nodded, smiling in a way he never used to smile at me. Permission, maybe? Or acknowledgement. I sat on their couch and played Blackbird. Not perfectly. My fingers still stumble sometimes. But honestly, when I finished, both kids were staring at me like I'd performed magic. "I didn't know you could do that," Emma said. "I'm still learning, or relearning, I guess. I used to play when I was young, then I stopped for a very long time." "Why did you stop?" Jack asked. Daniel was watching me, waiting to hear how I'd answer his son, how I'd explain the choices I'd made, the sacrifices that became erasures. "I thought I had to," I said carefully. "I thought being a good dad meant giving up everything that was mine, but I was wrong." "Your dad?" I looked at Daniel. "He's teaching me that you can be a great father and still be yourself. That maybe being yourself is part of being a great father. Daniel's eyes got bright. He nodded once, quick and sharp. Later, while the kids were playing outside, he and I sat in his kitchen, drinking coffee. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For changing. For trying. For showing them it's never too late to become who you're supposed to be." He paused. "I've been in therapy for 2 years, working through a lot of stuff about how I learned to be a man, how I learned to parent, and I realized I was starting to do the same thing to Jack and Emma, pushing aside what I wanted, making every decision about them, disappearing into the role. But you caught it earlier than I did, because I watched you wake up. Because you showed me it was possible to change the pattern." We sat there for a minute, two men who'd spent years not knowing each other, finally learning how. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he said quietly. I couldn't speak for a moment. When had he last said that to me? Had he ever? "I'm proud of you too. You're doing it right, better than I did. You did your best. My best wasn't good enough. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we just keep trying to do better." He smiled. Maybe that's all any of us can do. I drove home that evening with my guitar in the passenger seat, music playing through the speakers, a blues playlist I'd made. The sun was setting over the city, painting everything gold and pink, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than that. Something deeper. Peace. I'm not fixed. I'm not whole. I'm still figuring out who Walter is, still making discoveries, still stumbling through this late life awakening with no roadmap. But I'm here, actually present, actually alive in my own life. And for the first time in 40 years, that feels like enough.